Hello English Intensive, today we'll talk about squeezes and pro bets. Let's start with the definition of squeeze. It's the situation when we see a raise and one or more calls from our players and we are making decision to fold, to call or to squeeze. Why it is important to squeeze? Remember that you use increased sizing when you are squeezing and your opponents would have way more worse called calls than not called calls, spot odds when they making decision to call or not. So this way you would generate a lot of fold equity, and this action is very profitable, especially against opponents who do not know how to 4-bet and fight back your squeezes. In order to make squeeze profitable, you should be very careful with choosing of sizing. Remember that you are looking forward for effective stack size. In stack sizes 50 plus big blinds, it's 12 to 14 big blinds, not less of course, else you would get calls and it can cause problems since you usually do not have a good hand to play post flop. 30 to 50, it's about 10 to 11 big blinds, and in short stacks like 20 to 30, 7 or 8 big blinds would be enough because your opponents would fold a lot in short stacks. This is how we can squeeze on big blind against button or small blind. Here you can see that we squeeze a lot. For example, we can squeeze any of suited ace here, we can squeeze some queens and kings of suited. So these hands you can squeeze or you can call based on what kind of opponents are against you. If you see that your opponent is like calling station, which calls everything pre-flop, it's better to not to squeeze with king 7 of suited, for example, because you would get call and you would be playing out of position against button, for example, with not a good hand. So here you are trying to make a lot of folds pre-flop. These hands you have to squeeze like 9-8, 10-8, making off-suited combinations better than yours to fold, like king 10, king 9, queen 10, and so on. So don't forget to squeeze those hands, as well as suited Broadway, pairs, and here you have good strong value hands which you are ready to call for bet. Here you can see the situation when we are on small blind or big blind. I'm sorry, let me add big blind here. Okay, let's continue. The situation is a little bit different. So here we were on button, on big blind versus button plus small blind, and when we are against cutoff and button, the ranges combined are stronger than small blind plus button. We are not squeezing that wide. We do not squeeze off-suited combinations. We should be ready to play out of position against cutoff and button. So we choose suited aces for such situation and avoid bluff squeezing with the off-suited hands. In such stack sizes, it won't be a too good idea. So stick to this strategy, please. Okay, so now how we play on cutoff and button against early or plus middle position ranges. Here we just go to the upper part of our ranges. We squeeze all suited aces, right, and suited Broadway, plus some connectors and gap connectors. Again, if your opponents do not look like those who like to fold against 3-bets, just go and cold call it. Don't fold, just cold call. If you feel like they would fold a lot, feel free to squeeze. On button against middle positions, you can squeeze like this. So here you have a lot of squeezes and not so many calls. Ace-6, ace-5 better to just squeeze. And these combinations you can serve to call because they still have good equity, and you can cold call a lot of pairs and you would be dominating them with ace-9, for example. And don't forget to squeeze these off-suited combinations like everywhere. Broadway off-suited should be squeezed, not called, because these hands are not good for playing multi-way pots because they are off-suited and they do not hit textures not that good as those suited hands. Now let's talk about pro bet. Pro bet is the situation when we are playing out of position, and it's a situation for a big blind usually. We are calling a lot on big blind, we are trying to do it, and to increase our EV on big blind, we need to be ready to fight for pots, and now we are going to learn how to do it. Okay, so pro bet usually starts on the turn, because if your opponent checks the flop, it's the situation for you on big blind to make a pro bet. First of all, you need to pay attention to the run out you see. So if you see any run out below the queen, it's like an open way for you to make a pro bet. Usually you can use sizing 40 to 50% of the pot. In this way, your opponent probably won't fold a lot. Many opponents would fold, but there will be who would call. It's not a problem, the hand is not over yet, we have a lot of plans for the river. Now let's take a look at the examples. First of all, here we can see king 9. We see the check from our opponent and we make a bet on the turn. Here we have a gut shot. The next hand is 9-6. We defended it, we got check, and now we have a very strong draw here. Queen deuce, the same idea. We get a check, and we continue with not a big sizing, though anyway, you can use half pot, you can use small. So the general idea is the river, what we will do here. So opponents would often call hands like ace-x on the turn, second and third pairs, so they are like trying to protect their range. And we allow them to call on the turn with average sizing, letting them to bring their hand on the river, and here we will try to make everything fold. The sizing we would use should be big enough. It would be 90 to 120% of the pot. In this situation, ace hands would fold immediately. Hands with second and third pair would fold most of the times, and we will be fine getting our chips. So here we can see the same examples that were before, but with the river. So the hero bets the river, making 4 or 8 fold. Same idea, the hero bets the river, making hands like 8, 9 to fold, some deuces, for example, ace, deuce with ace of diamonds to fold, and so on and so on. And with queen deuce, we got a hit on the river. We do not bet big if we have value, right? So here the hero bets small, letting the opponent to call with his third pair. So that's the point. You can value bet the river with small sizing, pro bet with small sizing, letting the opponent to call. But with bluffs, please try to use bigger sizing, or you would get in such spots like in the last example. So keep in mind that you need to be always ready to bet the turn and the river, because some of opponents do not fold on the turn. They have a plan to bring their hand to showdown, and we want to ruin this plan betting big on the river. There are situations where you should not even try to pro bet, right? And when you see such textures like these 3, you probably expect C bet in 100% of situations. But if you see the check, then something is wrong. The opponent is probably ready to call your pro bets and bluff catch you. So this check is like very strongly protected. So in these cases, we just give up on the turn. We make a check, our opponent checks the flop. On the turn, okay, there is a situation when we can pro bet if we get a good, or we have a good draw. For example, we had 5-6 on the flop, opponent checks the flop, and we get, for example, I don't know, deuce on the turn, but we have open ender. So in this situation, we can bet small on the flop on the turn, letting ourselves to see the river. The worst scenario of the turn is when we get an ace. Sometimes opponent checks without an ace, but usually check range contains the ace, and we would have difficult time trying to bluff it out. Probably it's even impossible to make an ace fold in these cases, but if you have a draw, you can continue, you can pro bet, of course. On the turn, do not use big sizing, let yourself to see the river. As for statistics, we would like to see, squeeze should be around 10 to 12%, and you should have good pro bets on the turn and on the river. Turn plus river link should be about 60 to 80%. So you should be trying to bluff the river. This is it. Thank you, and looking forward to see your statistics improved. Goodbye.